Hello everyone, welcome to Courts This Week by Live Law. I'm Devojit Das and with me today is Advocate Ostika Das here to help us guide us through the legal intricacies of every story worth your attention. We have a crowded docket for you, a lot happened, so without any further ado, let's begin. Ostika, to get things started, let's talk about a very tense development in the Red Fort blast case because the Delhi High Court has refused to grant immediate permission to the accused, Jasir Bilal Wani, to meet his lawyer at the NIA headquarters.
Yes, and the refusal wasn't about the seriousness of the allegation, Devojit. It was about procedure. Wani's counsel argued that his request before the trial court to meet his lawyer had been rejected. But when the matter reached the High Court, Justice Swarnakanta Sharma asked a simple question: where is the order?
And was reported too that there was no written rejection, no order on record, not even an endorsed application.
Just an oral claim that the trial court did not allow it. And the judge made it very clear this is not a special case where the High Court can bypass procedure just because someone says their request was denied. The High Court basically said if the trial court hasn't passed an order, how can we set it aside? And instead of giving fresh directions, the judge told Wani's legal team to properly approach the trial court again and get their application decided through the normal legal route.
Amidst all of it is important to remember that this is a major terror conspiracy case. The NIA claims Wani was deeply embedded in the plot, alleging that he provided technical help to Umar ul-Nabi, the suspected bomber, including assisting with drone modifications and attempts to manufacture improvised rocket fuel.
Yes, and that's exactly why access to counsel becomes even more important in cases like this. Serious charges don't mean basic rights get diluted. The court didn't say Wani cannot meet his lawyer, only that his request must follow proper process. In a way, the High Court sent a dual message. One, national security cases don't get shortcuts. And two, accused persons don't get shortcuts either. Procedure protects everyone, the state and the accused.
Looks like the ball is back with the trial court now, and we'll have to wait and see how it rules on Wani's request to meet his counsel.
That's right.
Ostika, today's big headline from the Supreme Court revolves around a presidential reference concerning governors and passed bills by the state legislatures.
Exactly. Let's break it down. In May, the President referred 14 questions to the court under Article 143, challenging issues left open after the earlier state of Tamil Nadu versus Governor of Tamil Nadu judgment from April. That earlier case had laid down timelines and remedies when a governor delayed giving assent to a bill.
So this time around, it had to be differently treated by the court.
And it was. This time, the 5-judge bench, led by Chief Justice of India B.R. Gavai, said those conclusions had created doubt or confusion and needed an authoritative opinion. And one of the bigger reported takeaways, the court held that the governor can reserve a bill for the president's assent even after the bill has been repassed by the assembly following the governor's return of it. That means if a bill is passed, sent to the governor, returned with a message, and then passed again by the legislature with or without amendments, the governor still has two options: grant assent or reserve it for the president.
Okay, and what about the debate surrounding fixed timelines for governors and president?
There, the court rejected the idea that the judiciary can impose fixed timelines on governors or the president to act on bills. The April Tamil Nadu judgment had attempted to set deadlines. Here, the bench said that prescription was wrong and the constitution doesn't support the court making timelines or deeming assent automatically.
And there's more related to timelines that were being argued about.
Yes, the court reaffirmed that a governor cannot simply withhold assent indefinitely without returning the bill to the legislature for reconsideration. If a governor wants to withhold, they must send it back with a message under the first proviso of Article 200. Otherwise, it stands against federal principles. So to sum it up, in this reference, the court clarified that under Article 200 and by extension Article 201 for the president, when a bill comes to the governor after passage, the governor may give assent or withhold and return with a message or reserve for the president. If the legislature passes the bill again after reconsideration, the governor still can reserve it, contrary to what earlier 2-judge ruling said. The governor cannot just sit on the bill, he must act or return it, and courts cannot step in to fix the timeline for the governor's decision or invent a concept like deemed assent.
What this means politically, states like Tamil Nadu had challenged the governor's refusal to act, citing delayed bills. The earlier judgment had seemed to give states the upper hand by setting deadlines. This new opinion rebalances it, giving the governor more discretion but reminding him that long delays or silence are not acceptable either.
Constitutionally, it emphasizes that this interplay between legislature, governor, and president is meant to remain flexible, consultation based, and consistent with federal dialogue, not rigid deadlines enforced by courts.
Osaka, arguably one of the biggest judgments of the year came out this week, where the Supreme Court struck down the entire Tribunal Reforms Act of 2021, calling it unconstitutional and a direct threat to judicial independence.
Exactly. This judgment was also delivered by a bench led by Chief Justice B.R. Gavai and comprising Justice K. Virod Chandran. The bench said that the act basically revived the very same provisions that had already been struck down in earlier Madras Bar Association cases. Things like a minimum age of 50 years to be appointed to tribunals, 4-year tenures, and the search cum selection committee sending just 2 names for each vacancy, giving the government disproportionate control.
And interestingly, the court had already ruled in 2020 and 2021 that these conditions are unconstitutional because they undermine judicial independence. Yet the parliament just reintroduced them in the 2021 Act.
Right, and the court called this legislative override in the strictest sense. They said you can pass a new law after a judgment, but you cannot resurrect provisions already declared unconstitutional, especially with no change in circumstances. The court has now restored the earlier judicial directions, including longer tenures and more balanced selection committees, until a new valid law is enacted.
And importantly, the court also directed the union government to establish a National Tribunals Commission within 4 months to institutionalize tribunal independence and reduce executive interference.
In short, this is a major pushback from the judiciary. The message is clear. You can reform tribunals, but you cannot weaken them or ignore binding judgments.
Next, we have an interesting development coming out of hearings in the Supreme Court, and it's about something we usually discuss only when tragedies strike. That is human-wildlife conflict.
Yes, and the court has finally said what many activists have been arguing for years. Treat human-wildlife conflict as a natural disaster. That means states should provide 10 lakh rupees compensation for every human death caused by wild animals.
And the court wasn't just talking compensation, was it?
No. It criticized the ad hoc delayed response systems across states. They said victims' families often wait months because forest and revenue departments don't coordinate. And the bench directed the National Tiger Conservation Authority, or NTCA, to create a model guidelines within 6 months. And then states must implement them within the next 6 months. So the court has actually set a timeline, something which is highly desired in matters concerning environmental protection and human-wildlife conflict.
Also, the court said states must build proper coordination between forest officials, disaster management authorities, police, and local bodies so that response teams don't treat these incidents like random animal encounters but as a full-fledged emergency.
And importantly, they recognize the broader impact, not just deaths, but crop loss, livestock loss, and community trauma. By calling it a natural disaster, states will have to use disaster funds and create faster relief mechanisms instead of relying on ad hoc measures.
Moving on to a national law university that has been embroiled in tensions this year, as this week also saw the Supreme Court erasing a controversial directive it had earlier imposed on the former Vice Chancellor of NUJS Calcutta. He was asked to include in his resume a record of a sexual harassment complaint that had been dismissed as time-barred.
So this case involves Professor Nirmal Kanti Chakraborty. Back in September, the court had held that even though the complaint could not be pursued because it was filed late, the judgment must be made part of the resume of the VC, effectively keeping a permanent stigma on him. Fast forward to November 17, the same bench of Justices Pankaj Mithal and Prasanna B. Varale agreed to delete that mandatory direction.
And what was the reasoning provided for this move?
There was no finding on merits against him, just a procedural dismissal under the Sexual Harassment of Women at Workplace Prevention, Prohibition and Redressal Act 2013. The court noted its earlier purpose had been to apprise the public of what happened, but since there was no adjudicated guilt, insisting the VC carried this in his CV would amount to a permanent punishment without basis.
So they deleted the exact wording of it.
The part that started from thus to personally in paragraph 34 of the September judgment, that direction is now gone. And this is big because it raises questions about how far courts can go in tagging reputational consequences onto someone when there is no finding of misconduct. This spotlights a delicate balance. The court wants transparency and accountability in institutions, especially educational ones. But we are also confronting the principle that if there is no adjudication of guilt, you can't slap someone with an indefinite label.
We'll watch how other institutions respond and whether this sets a precedent for how allegations must be handled academically and administratively. Moving on to our next story, as the Supreme Court this week delivered an important clarification for judicial officers who want to switch states. What can you tell us about this, Ostika?
It says the new 3-year practice requirement for applying to judicial services in other states won't apply to officers who joined before 20th May 2025. And that 20th May judgment had made 3 years of bar practice mandatory for anyone applying to entry-level judicial posts. But this latest ruling says If you were already a judge before that date, you're exempt from that rule.
But the court did not really give a free pass, did it?
No, it did not. Those pre-May 20 officers must still complete 3 years of judicial service in their current state before applying elsewhere. So someone appointed in 2019 with 6 years on the bench, they can apply to another state even if they never had 3 years of practice as an advocate.
But anyone appointed after May 20th is struck with the new rule. They must have 3 years bar practice before attempting interstate judicial recruitment.
A big clarification for judicial careers and one that will influence transfers and mobility across state services.
Next, we take a look at the latest from the Delhi High Court that involves a major inheritance battle, and it's just getting more complicated. On Friday, the court heard from the son of Priya Kapoor, wife of the late industrialist Sanjay Kapoor, who opposed a partition suit filed by the children of Karishma Kapoor.
That's correct. The suit was filed by Karishma Kapoor's children, Samaira and Kian, claiming a share in their late father Sanjay Kapoor's estate. They alleged that the will produced in March 2025 was forged and excluded them unfairly. But now, the minor child of Priya Kapoor has stepped in via counsel, arguing that the lawsuit is based on speculation and guesswork.
And how are the arguments panning out in the court?
Senior advocate Akhil Sibal, representing the minor son, told the court it's admitted the plaintiffs knew about the will's witnesses and their exclusion, yet they made no inquiries until later. He argued that the claim lacks substance. On the other side, the plaintiffs described the will as bogus, saying they were excluded despite being Class 1 heirs and that the document was revealed weeks after Sanjay's death.
The court is set to hear this again on November 27th, and Live Law will, of course, keep tracking the case as it develops. And for our final story from the week, in a sharp reprimand, the Punjab and Haryana High Court pulled up the Haryana government for disciplinary action against a doctor and imposed a cost of 50,000 rupees on the state.
Yes, the case involved a doctor who was on emergency duty during COVID-19. When an MLA visited the hospital ward, the doctor did not rise from his seat. In response, the government issued a show cause notice and withheld his NOC for postgraduate studies.
So that's why the court responded the way it did.
Exactly. The court called the government's conduct arbitrary, insensitive, and a very worrying example of frontline medical professionals being expected to perform protocol when they're actually battling emergencies. The court went on to hold that disciplining a doctor merely because he did not stand up when an MLA entered the emergency ward cannot be sustained. The doctor's request for NOC was denied simply because disciplinary proceedings were pending, even though he had qualified for admission.
The court rightly held that the state cannot place protocol expectations above medical duty, especially during a pandemic when health workers were already under intense pressure.
And as per court's direction, the state must outright issue the NOC without delay. For health sector workers and public servants across states, this judgment is important.
This brings this episode of Courts This Week to a close, but if you want to access all of these stories in detail, visit livelaw.in and keep following us on all our socials to stay updated with everything that is law. This is Advocate Ostika Das, and I'm Debojit. Thank you for watching.